Hi, welcome back. Today I'm going to be working on the skirt part of the corseted lining for the sunset dress. I'm going to be using this gold lining fabric which I got from Spotlight, and I'm going to start by cutting all of my skirt pieces. So this is my front pattern piece which will be cut on the fold, and then I've got the other pattern piece that will be the side front, side back and centre back, and I'm going to lay my pattern pieces on there as I showed you when I made the skirt pattern. So once I've laid my top piece on the skirt, I'm then going to cut each one up to an inch above this line, which is the original bottom of the corset. So that's where I stopped the navy blue corset that I made in the last part. So by cutting an inch above that, it will give me the seam allowance to join the two pieces together. I'm going to press my lining and then cut and pin all these pieces together, and at that point I'm going to make sure it fits properly over the petticoat. Okay, so I bought my fabric before I made my pattern, and this lining isn't wide enough for my pattern pieces and I don't have enough. So this is my centre front piece here with my fabric folded in half selvage to selvage. My pattern piece is wider than the fabric. So the fabric's not wide enough to cut the centre front piece, and I don't have enough length to cut all the pieces. So I'm going to cut all the skirt pieces sideways like this, and then I'll just have to seam on the top parts where it goes into the corset. Oh, I'm annoyed with myself for not planning this better. I did it in such a rush to get the fabric before all the social isolation that I just didn't buy enough. And I didn't even think about the width of the lining fabric when I cut my pattern pieces, which was silly. So there you go, lesson learned, plan better. So I'm going to cut all my pieces of the skirt with the length going selvage to selvage. Then I'll cut the top piece up to where I showed you just now on the corset. And then I'll just have to seam each one together, which is not ideal, but it will work. I've cut all my skirt panels out going across the fabric, and then I've just used a French seam to add the extra bit on top because it wasn't quite wide enough to do the full length that I needed. So the next thing I'm going to do is pin all of these together, pin them onto the bottom of the corset, and just check them on the mannequin to see how the size of the skirt looks over the petticoat. Okay, so here is my lining just all pinned together and put back on the mannequin. I've just put a little bit of padding in the hips and the bust just to give it sort of more of an idea of how it's going to look. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it, apart from the line here where I had to join it, which I'm really annoyed with myself for not planning that better. So I can see now that the skirt is just a little bit fuller than the petticoat. There's a bit more fullness than I actually want. So I think what I'm going to do, the fit at the top's fine. So you can see it's a bit too full here. So I'm going to take that in. So I'll stitch my ½ inch at the top, then stitch into there. And then I think I need to take out maybe about that much all the way down to the bottom, just to take all that excess out. So where's my tape measure? Oh, it's around my neck. So as I stitch this, I'm going to stitch ½ inch at the top, then bring it out to about 1.25 inches there, and 2 inches there. And then I'll stitch 2 inches all the way down. And then I'll mark my pattern pieces and just change that on my pattern pieces, so when I cut the outside, it will be cut to the right ½ inch seam allowance all the way down. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the shape of it. I think it looks nice over the hoop. The length's good. I've got lots of hem to play with. Okay, so now I've seen it on here, I can sew all of my seams with this extra seam allowance coming down here. I'm not going to stitch the centre back seam together. I'm going to overlock either side and just cut that excess off. But I'm not going to stitch that together yet because it makes it easier when it comes to joining the outside and the lining together, and for joining the skirt onto the corset in a minute as well. So I'm going to leave that centre back seam open for now. I'm also going to overlock around the top and around the hem just to stop it fraying for now. Okay, I've stitched all those seams. You can see how much extra I've taken off. You can see I've got my original ½ inch seam allowance at the top, and then gradually more and more down to 2 inches all the way down. And I thought before I pressed it and overlocked it and took all this excess off, I'd just check it again to see how it's looking. And I'm much happier with it. It's still got enough fullness to be a nice shape, but there's not nearly as much overlap between all the panels over the petticoat. My petticoat looks like it's sitting wonky. It looks like it's pushing that way for some reason. I'll have to have a look and see why it's doing it. Normally I would have checked this fit at the toile stage, but when I made my skirt pattern, I didn't make a full toile because I was trying to save fabric. A skirt like this uses a lot of fabric, so this way it's a bit more economical to check it in the actual lining fabric than to make a full toile up. Okay, so now I'm happy with it. I'm going to press and overlock the seams, overlock the top and bottom. Then I'm going to mark these changes on my pattern pieces and then just trim off that excess. My skirt lining is all pressed and overlocked. So the next thing I need to do is join the corset part and the skirt part together. So I'm going to pin them together, right sides together. The right side being the side that's going to be against your skin, so the inside of the dress. So for my corset, that's the side with my labels and my hanging loops on. And for the skirt, that'll be with my seams upwards, because we want the nice finished seams to be on the inside of the dress. So I'm just going to line up all my seams and pin the skirt onto the corset. So you can see how having the centre back seam open at this point makes it a lot easier. So I haven't worried about finishing off the bottom edge of the corset. I don't want to make it any bulkier than it already is. The satin's interface, so it's not going to fray too much. And this part's going to be hidden on the inside underneath the outside layer of the dress. Cool, so I'm going to pin all the way along like that. Then sew my 1/2 inch seam allowance. Because I've got the two colours together, it doesn't really matter which I use. So I've got the gold in the machine from sewing the skirt. So I'll just use a gold thread to sew that together. Then that's our lining made. I'll put it back onto the mannequin once I've sewn this. I'm still going to leave the centre back seam open for now. I might just pin that together so you can see what it looks like. So I will show you the finished thing on my dress form as soon as I've sewn my seam allowance. Okay, here is the finished lining all together. I've just put a bit of stuffing in, so if the corset looks a funny shape, that's why. So you can see there's still just a little bit of fullness over the petticoat, but it's giving a really nice shape. I wish there was just a bit more fullness in the petticoat here, just to curve that a bit more. But it's what I've got here, so it'll be fine. It's still a really nice big sort of ball gown shape. Yeah, and there's not too many overlaps now for the colour to hide in, which will make it easier when it comes to airbrushing the top layer. I put it on the dress form inside out, so this is the actual inside of the dress, so the part that will be touching your skin. So these are the seams where I had to join the skirt pieces together. They don't look too bad actually. Now they're pressed and they're all together, they hide fairly well. I'm still annoyed with myself for not buying enough fabric and not taking the width of the fabric into account when I made my pattern, but it is what it is. I think it looks fine and it's on the inside, so no one's even going to see. So that's my lining all complete. So in the next part, I will show you how I start making that outside layer. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video.